Last year, we did a two-parter on the conflict going on in Sudan, an explainer of what led to the conflict that's now raging. If you've been following along on the news, you know it's gotten a lot worse. Last week, we played part one of our series. If you haven't heard that yet, go back and listen. Here's part two, the chalk bicycle.
People talk about it all the time, how stillness and quietness and silence have such a heavy weight, especially because you're blindfolded, so we didn't know where we're being taken.
This is Mohamed Osman, or Mo. In the last episode, Mo told us about getting arrested in Khartoum after a pro-democracy protest. About a year later, Mo got into trouble again.
We were doing some work with civil society for legal support, especially for torture survivors by security forces. They raided the office and then we got picked up from there by the security services. And then we've been taken, you're blindfolded all the way. We don't really know what's happening or what's going to happen next.
Mo has this sort of low-key affect when he speaks. But the things that Mo has witnessed and done are hardcore. This was 2013. The genocide in Darfur had taken place about a decade earlier. The man mostly responsible for all that killing, Omar al-Bashir, was still in power. And Mo was about to learn a lesson about the nature of that power. After he'd been questioned, Mo's interrogator had him and a few other detainees brought to a room.
And the room had, in one of the side walls, painted by chalk, this big bicycle. And then he asked me first, to ride it.
So there's a chalk bicycle, like a drawing of a bicycle on a wall.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was this moment when he asked me to do this, and one of the detainees, who clearly was quite rough and beaten, started actually giggling. Because so what do you mean? We can't, it's not a real bike. We cannot do it. And in a very calm way, the interrogator said again, go and ride that bike. And after back and forth, he just laughed and listened. He's like, well, we're going to make you stay enough here to know that if we told you to do something, you will do it. It's not about the reality of it.
So that was the power Mo was fighting against in Sudan under Omar al-Bashir. When they told you to ride a bicycle drawn in chalk on the wall, you behaved and believed like it was a real bicycle.
And that was very clear, the psychological aspect of it, of subjugating people to do things, losing the critical faculty of realizing what's real or what's not.
Several years later, in 2018, Mo became a researcher for Human Rights Watch. And since then, he's been fighting that power by investigating and documenting what's real and what's not in Sudan.
This is a power conflict. This is a conflict about regional interests, about global interests. This is a conflict when there is a world that, years and decades ago said never again, and it happens again and again and again.
This is Rights and Wrongs from Human Rights Watch. I'm Ngofeen Mputubwele. This is the second in our two-part series on Sudan, our attempt to explain what's going on in that country. Because as you probably know, the news has been bad, really bad. Fighting in Khartoum, mass killings in Darfur, again, another possible genocide in the works.
It began a little over a year ago as an argument between two top generals. It's now become a full-blown civil war.
I think the numbers now are approximately 14,000 people killed, but then 10 million displaced.
In part one, me, Mo, and another member of the African diaspora, historian Dr. Christopher Townsell, we brought the story up to about 2019. The backstory of what led up to the current crisis, which now we'll do our best in this episode to explain. It's kind of complicated.
Recap. The dictator is deposed.
On December 19th, 2018, a revolution started to spread throughout Sudan.
The democracy movement that had started with the Arab Spring and that Mo had been a part of, it hadn't gone away. But neither had the dictatorship. Omar al-Bashir stayed in power by spending lavishly on security. Coup-proofing, it's called. There were two main players. One, the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF. They had about 300,000 soldiers. And then two, second group, was the RSF, or Rapid Support Forces, with about 100,000 soldiers. And for years, it had worked. That bicycle stayed chalked on the wall.
But the price of bread had gotten so high.
The economy was tanking. And by late 2018, Bashir started looking very weak in the face of ongoing pro-democracy protests.
Question number 1. Who deposed Bashir?
So in 2019, Hemeti, who was the head of the Rapid Support Forces, and General Burhan, who was the head of the Sudanese Armed Forces,
Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti. Super important names in this story.
They see that the writing is on the wall for Bashir.
So on April 11th, 2019, they made a move that surprised civilians and Bashir.
Hemeti and Burhan,
Sudan's longest-serving leader, has been arrested.
Arrest Omar al-Bashir.
This was celebrated in the streets of Khartoum. But here you have a pretty uneasy political situation. The pro-democracy movement has succeeded in pushing Bashir out of power. But it was Bashir's lieutenants, Hemeti and Burhan, who actually had the power to arrest him. Up till now, these two men had been working with Bashir to suppress protesters, even killing scores of them in Khartoum. But within hours of arresting Bashir, these same guys, they suddenly turn around to civilian leaders and say, hey, we want to work with you to restore democracy.
Question number 2. Who are these guys?
We want free and fair elections and for the Sudanese people to pick who they want.
Remember our two generals? Well, that's one of them, Hemeti, the head of RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. From videos I've seen, he's tall, thin, with hair closely cropped like Obama's, and sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't, mustache. He seems very unassuming, and for someone with his CV, he looks surprisingly young.
Known by the nickname Hemeti, he hails from a camel trading family in Darfur, where he rose up the ranks of widely feared Arab militias. A chief, he caught the eye of President al-Bashir, who asked him to lead a campaign against the Darfur insurgency. Part of the notorious Janjaweed, his militias rampaged the region, leaving mass rape and murder in their wake.
And this is the other general, General Burhan of SAF. He's fleshy, thickly mustached, and in videos he's often in uniform, wearing aviator sunglasses and a beret. So Hemeti, slight and unassuming. General Burhan, big and blustery. General Burhan had fought in Darfur, where he worked closely with Hemeti and the Janjaweed. Here's another bit of important information. Burhan and Hemeti aren't just military men, they're rich military men.
To maintain the RSF's loyalty, Bashir gave Hemeti financial autonomy and allowed him to take control of some of Darfur's gold mines.
Hemeti controlled those gold mines, rented out RSF soldiers as mercenaries, and cultivated a network of foreign leaders and businessmen. General Burhan and the SAF made money in a kind of crony capitalism. After they deposed Bashir in 2019, Burhan is named chair of the governing council and Hemeti vice chair. The idea was to share power with civilians until a democratic process could be put into place.
And so in the interim from 2019 until 2021, you had this kind of transitional council where you had a joint civilian and military unity government, right? It was agreed that there would be a transitional council where the army would be in charge for 18 months, but then they would hand over power to civilians for 18 months. Hold on one moment.
Okay, pause here. Burhan and Hemeti have been in charge for close to 18 months, and they're about to hand over the reins to a civilian government for the next 18 months. And Professor Townsell's kid just entered the Zoom room. We'll be right back after the break.
I'm Juanita Gubertus Estrada, America's director at Human Rights Watch. I used to be a congresswoman in Colombia. From climate change to creeping authoritarianism, the challenges facing Latin America and the Caribbean are very complex and are varied. The work we do is often difficult. Sometimes it's even overwhelming, but it is always, always rewarding. And it is thanks to our supporters that my team is able to continue to stand up for people's rights in the region, to shine a spotlight on crimes and abuses, to pursue justice and accountability, but most importantly, to prevent future violations. If you would like to join them in supporting our work, please visit hrw.org/podcast/donate. That's hrw.org/podcast/donate. Thank you.
Question number 3. What could go wrong?
In 2021, the Sudanese military, led by Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces stage a coup. So the two men responsible for kicking Bashir out stage a coup in 2021 to basically undermine the kind of civilian process, right?
Mm-hmm. So they're with the civilians in 19 because the civilians are protesting. They're with the civilians. Everyone, they're like, all right, let's get Bashir out. Bashir's out. But by 2021, they're like, just kidding. We're in charge.
Exactly.
I think what makes it more unfair that there were years when we were there. Like, we ousted the dictatorship. We were building a democracy that got hijacked. And I think that even make it harder moving from this place of hope when Sudan was really a beacon of hope in the region of a vibrant civil society and vibrant activism. And then that got snatched by military dictators under, the watch of the world that allowed it to happen in the first place.
You said under the world's watch. Do you feel that people outside of Sudan failed Sudan?
Yeah, I think we can even quickly track that to the last few years of al-Bashir dictatorship, right? Which is like kind of isolated, he's wanted by the International Criminal Court, US sanctions. And then in the last years, we start seeing al-Bashir and his regime more and more becoming closer to the US because of intelligence and counterterrorism cooperation. We start seeing the regime at that time getting a bit more concessions because of the support to the EU migration control plans. And this is the moment when people are like, but what about the human rights issues that you stood for? And you said, well, we are against this dictatorship because it oppresses people. The moment you see your own benefits, then you start conceding very quickly.
When the revolution happened, Mo says, the Sudanese people wanted accountability. They wanted justice for victims of the former regime. They wanted that chalk bicycle on the wall to be erased.
Most of the international actors, from the European Union, the United States, did not really prioritize that. They prioritized the question of stability. Over and over people told them stability cannot be sustained if you have people who are not willing to see a transition reaches its final station around achieving sustainable democracy. That just never happens.
It's still 2021. Burhan and Hemeti have arrested some of the civilian leaders of the government, and the military is now fully in charge. And as Mo just said, the international community just sort of lets it happen without much protest. But Burhan and Hemeti have their own problems. They have to figure out how to share power between them, between the SAF and the RSF. And this is where things really start to go south.
Question number 4. How did all hell break loose?
Okay, so the issue that basically explodes in April 2023, during the twilight of what should have been the period in when Hemeti and Burhan are in power before they give power to a civilian council, there was disagreement between Hemeti and Burhan about the integration of the Rapid Support Forces into the Sudanese army.
Burhan wants Hemeti's RSF to merge with the Sudanese Armed Forces in 2 years. 2 years. Hemeti disagrees.
He's thinking, well, now I'm going to lose all of my basically political capital.
And probably a lot of capital too. Hemeti makes a counteroffer. A merger in 22 years. The civilian leaders split it down the middle and say, hey, 10 years. Room for compromise, right? Nope.
And so it's in the midst of that disagreement that the Rapid Support Forces begin launching coup operations last April 2023.
We begin with some breaking news coming in from Sudan, where we're getting reports of heavy gunfire across the capital.
The army and the RSF have been battling it out to have the upper hand in the capital.
Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan made his first appearance outside the Army's General Command since clashes erupted with the Rapid Support Forces.
Talks to try to find an end to the bloodshed have failed to produce results.
Anyone who says there is an agreement or a deal with the RSF or someone is helping is delusional. We don't strike deals with traitors or any party that betrayed the Sudanese people.
As with all wars, of course, there have been massive civilian casualties.
In Khartoum alone, fighting killed at least 13,000 people.
Civilian deaths in Sudan have been hard to count, but that number is almost certainly an underestimate. So this is the beginning of the conflict that's still going on today, right now, with massive displacements of civilians and with the UN warning about a potential genocide.
Question number 5. Given all that, why does the media almost always give the impression that this is an ethnic conflict?
As Mo said earlier, the roots of this conflict lie in this struggle over power. But he also said something else.
I think I always believed that this war is war against Sudanese civilians by far and large. And I think this is the starting point of defining it. This is not a tribal conflict of having two tribes who just woke up one day and decided that they need to, exterminate each other.
If it's not a tribal conflict, why is this the way Western media, including the New York Times, often depicts this conflict? Well, here's one reason.
The RSF also took over much of Darfur.
Darfur, because a lot of this killing is happening in Darfur. Same as 20 years ago.
The UN has accused the paramilitary group of ethnic cleansing and war crimes in West Darfur when it and allied militias targeted ethnic Masalit tribesmen. The international agency says in that state alone, between 10 to 15,000 people have been killed and more than 500,000 displaced by violence.
Quick reminder from the last episode, the RSF emerged in 2013 out of the Janjaweed, the ethnically Arab militias Bashir used in the genocide 20 years ago. The RSF seems to be engaging in ethnic cleansing operations in Darfur now, in the midst of the nationwide conflict. It's an aspect of the conflict Mo knows well. He's a principal researcher on a recent Human Rights Watch report, The Masalit Will Not Come Home, Ethnic Cleansing and Crimes Against Humanity in Al Janina, West Darfur. But
look at ethnicity as one factor. It is definitely there in certain parts of Darfur as a driver for the conflict, but it's not the only factor driving this violence. This is a power conflict.
Mo sees it as a struggle between democracy and authoritarianism.
I think in a way to look at what's happening now, or what's happening since April 15 last year, the Sudanese people at that time were fighting a coup that took place in 2021. The coup by the military leaders of the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces decided to hijack the democratic transition for different reasons. It was a democratic transition that was very challenged. From the first hour, people took to the street very spontaneously, said like, no coup anymore. It continued till 2023. There were different negotiations. Sudanese people were like, no return to a military rule. We're not going to share power with human rights abusers and perpetrators. We cannot coexist. Democracy cannot coexist with abusers. And the same military leaders, they decided that they cannot coexist among themselves. So they, on April 15th, they went into war with each other. And Sudanese people have paid the price for it. Sudanese people, basically, their fight towards democracy have been again being taken, hijacked, and it's basically a fight for survival. Trying to find safe routes to flee, while at the same time trying to provide food, other services, healthcare, education, refuge to the people in Sudan. But still, people, in a way, trying to organize and to find their own path outside of this conflict. The thing is, the world is not listening to them. It's again and again we're seeing the world listening to the military leaders, the political elites in different sides. There is really no inclusivity for people who are actually on the ground. Many of them are facing daily risk of being bombed or shelled or arrested, detained, tortured, who work with very limited resources since there is really no humanitarian response to the crisis taking place in Sudan. These voices are sidelined.
Imagine all the people.
Imagine the greatest artists of our time united to save Darfur now.
Question number 6. Why doesn't the world care so much this time?
So, I just want to zoom out for a second. Starting in about 2003, the violence in Sudan's western region of Darfur caught the world's attention.
In many ways it's unfair, but it is nevertheless true that this genocide will be on your watch.
And as I've been working on this episode, I'm wondering, what's changed? Why is this new conflict in the same part of the world with some of the same actors not getting the same amount of attention today? History might have something to do with it. Christopher Townsell pointed out that 20 years ago, the Darfur crisis came right after 9/11, at the beginning of the War on Terror and the Iraq War.
And so within kind of Western media, this was the height of widely circulating polarizations, right? Where people were pitting Christianity against Islam. Some people were framing Arabs and Muslims as threatening to national security interests. And so when Darfur happens, we know that this was one of those odd moments where you had kind of bipartisan support for oppressed Sudanese people, because Darfur became a kind of microcosm for some people to say, look, in this country, Arab Muslims are persecuting Black people.
That framing is still there. News reports still center on this ethnic aspect of the conflict. But Mo thinks the lack of interest might stem from something else.
One of the things that I would realize in the way most of the Western media would cover Sudan for years is probably the inability to deal with complexities and nuances. It's maybe fear that the audience may not really comprehend the complexity and not really want to engage with it. And I think our work aims in so many ways to appreciate the complexity and say, yeah, it is complex and we're not going to give you all the answers, but we're not going to deny it is complex. And we're still going to dig in and try to do our best to bring you some facts about what's happening on the ground.
This is a complicated story. I want you to imagine for a second you're holding a piece of paper. So I told you guys on the show I'm an etymology nerd. And the word complicated, it just means that it's something that comes with folds. And in order to uncomplicate it, we got to just unpack those folds. And that's what Mo is trying to do. He's trying to get us to figure out that this isn't some conflict that's like way beyond our grasp. It's something that if we just look at it closely and unpack it, we can understand it. As for actionable next steps, Human Rights Watch is recommending that the UN and the African Union deploy a civilian protection mission to Sudan, and call on their respective institutions to press the warring parties to ensure trapped civilians can safely flee. You've been listening to Rights and Wrongs from Human Rights Watch. This episode was produced by me and Curtis Fox. Our associate producer is Sophie Soloway. Thanks also to Ife Fatunase, Stacey Sullivan, and Anthony Gale. The archival clips in this episode are from Vox, France 24, Africa News, The Associated Press, The National News, The Daily Mail, and Al Jazeera. We are taking a summer break, but we'll be back with a new season of Rights and Wrongs on September 16th. I'm Ngofeen Mputubwele. Thanks so much for listening.